Welcome to the lecture on the first chapter of Michael Lynch's book, True to Life, entitled Truisms about Truth. I'm Andrew Chapman, and in this lecture I'm going to be outlining why and how truth matters according to Michael Lynch. In the first chapter of his book, True to Life, Lynch outlines four of what he calls truisms about truth in order to set the stage for the argumentative project that he engages in for the rest of his book. We are only looking at the first chapter here, but I really do recommend the entire book to you. It's a short book, just a couple hundred pages, and it addresses not only the issues that we'll be looking at in this lecture, but a number of subsidiary, ancillary, supportive issues concerning truth, the nature of truth, the value of truth, what people have said about truth in the past, and refutations of negative claims that have been made about truth both throughout the history of philosophy and in contemporary philosophical debates. Before we get into the specifics of Lynch's claims, however, I want to very briefly outline some lessons from Nietzsche, Aristotle, and Plato regarding truth and the nature of truth and the relation between human knowers like you and me and truth. The first lesson comes from Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche claims that truth is attainable so long as we remember the sorts of creatures we are. If we set up the game so that the only things that we're calling truths are things that are not possibly knowable or might not even be truths at all, then of course we're going to fail at getting to truth. So the first step in attaining truths, in getting justification for true belief, in knowing the world as it actually is to recognize what we are, where we came from, the sorts of things that affect our ability to know things and to believe truly. The second lesson is from Aristotle. According to Aristotle, truth is a matter of a proposition's representing the world to be as it actually is. This is a theory that is known in contemporary philosophical discussions as the correspondence theory of truth, and according to the correspondence theory of truth, propositions, those are the sorts of things that can be expressed via utterances, or can be written down, or can be believed. Propositions are true if and only if they correspond to reality, meaning if and only if they say that the world is the way that it actually is. So truth isn't a matter of opinion, according to Aristotle, according to contemporary theorists about truth. Truth is a matter of utterances, written sentences, beliefs, representing the world accurately. And our final lesson is from Plato. Truth is objective and absolute. Truth subjectivism and truth relativism are self-undermining positions. To say that truth is objective is to say that truth is a matter of fact, something about the way the world actually is, and not a mere matter of opinion, a subjective state, a belief, a seeming. And to say that truth is absolute is to say that truth isn't relative. If truth were relative, then something's being true would be a matter not just of its relation to the world, but also its relation to something else, usually conceived of in terms of the mental states of the person holding the belief, or the procedures or activities of communities in which things are believed. But this isn't the nature of truth. Truth is only a relationship between propositions and the world, independent of anybody's particular mental states, what anybody thinks, how anybody acts. And Plato showed that to us 2,500 or so years ago in the dialogue, the Theaetetus, by showing us that the positions of truth relativism and truth subjectivism aren't just false, they're even worse, they're self-undermining. Now let's get into Michael Lynch's specific claims. Lynch claims that there are 4 truisms about truth. The bulk of this lecture is going to be laying out and explaining and arguing for, when necessary, the truth of these truisms. These truisms are: 1. That truth is objective. 2. That truth is good. 3. That truth is a worthy goal of inquiry. And 4. That truth is worth caring about for its own sake. As I've said, I'll take a look at each one of these separately, in turn, explain what they mean, why Lynch thinks that they are true, not only true but truisms, and argue for them when necessary. But first, what is a truism about truth? Well, here's a quotation from Lynch. Lynch says, "The fact that these are truisms doesn't mean that everybody agrees with them. Some of us are confused about truth. We have contradictory beliefs about it. So we may believe these truisms, but also believe something else that undermines our belief in one or all of them. Moreover, nothing is so obvious that someone hasn't proclaimed it to be false, misguided, naive, incoherent, impossible, or corrupting for the young, and lots of folks continue to say as much about these 4 ideas." Wittgenstein once remarked that the job of the philosopher was to assemble reminders, to point out to us what has been right there in front of our face all along. While this isn't all that a philosopher does, there's a lot of sense in this point. The very familiarity of something can make us forget or even deny its importance. When that happens, we need to be reminded of its role in our everyday life. This is what we need in the case of truth. So, according to Lynch, the 4 things that he labels truisms about truth are things that are right in front of our faces, that are obvious about truth, but that we may have forgotten, we may have gotten confused about, and it takes the philosopher to restate these truisms, to tell us what they mean, for us to recognize that these are truisms. On to the first truism about truth, that truth is objective. To say that truth is objective is to say that it's not subjective. That is, it's not a mental state. It's not an opinion. It's not a whim. Now, we're all familiar with that term objective, but when we apply it to the term truth, sometimes that can sound a little bit strange. Don't people say that they have their own truths, that things are true for them but maybe not for other people? Well, people do say that, but saying that is a confusion. Usually what people mean when they say that is that they believe particular things or they have particular evidence. And as we'll see, belief and evidence presuppose the concept of truth, but they aren't themselves truth. Now, here's a very short argument given by Lynch in favor of the conclusion that truth is objective. Premise 1. There are some things that are not currently known. Of course, we'd have no reason to continue investigating the world, to continue doing science, to continue to fund scientific enterprises if we thought that everything there was to know about the world was already known. 2. If there are some things that are not currently known, then truth is objective. Well, why think this? Well, if truth were subjective, then everything that was true would already be believed, would already be someone's opinion, would already be known. However, there are lots of things that we don't currently know. Therefore, truth is objective. And it's easy to recognize that truth is objective if we look into our pasts rather than looking at our current situation or our potential future situation. In the past, we made discoveries. What were we discovering when we made discoveries? We were discovering the truth. But we couldn't possibly discover the truth if truth weren't objective. There'd be nothing there to discover. Therefore, truth has to be objective. On to our second truism. Truth is good. What this means, according to Lynch, is that everything else being equal, it's better to have true beliefs than to have false beliefs. Now, that everything else being equal clause might be a little bit confusing. So, what Lynch means by this, and philosophers besides Lynch use this everything else being equal modifier quite a bit. But what's meant here is that if you have two different situations, and the two situations are exactly the same, except for in one there's a true belief, and in the other there's a false belief, the first, the one with the true belief, is the better situation. Now, sometimes it's hard to evaluate these everything else being equal clauses because it's hard to keep everything else fixed. We think, well, if I had a true belief, then things would be going much better for me, then I would feel better about the world, etc. Well, in order to evaluate this claim, we need to say that the only difference is that in one situation there's a true belief, in another one there's a false belief. Things are going exactly as well for you in both of them. You're exactly as happy in both of them. It's just that there's a false belief in one, a true belief in the other. And according to Lynch, the goodness of truth can be cashed out in terms of the situation with the true belief being better than the situation with the false belief. Now, this doesn't mean that truth is the only thing that's good, or even that it's the only thing that's good in the way of belief. Certainly, having beliefs about our own self-esteem, whether those beliefs are true or false, if those beliefs get us to accomplish certain things, then that's good. We should have beliefs that help us accomplish things, beliefs about our self-esteem. And of course, there are things outside of belief that can be good as well. For example, donating to people in their time of need. That's a good thing. So to say that truth is good is not saying it's the only good at all. It's just that it is a good. It's better than the opposite. However, if everything else is the same, given the option between a true belief and a false belief, the true belief is better. That means you ought to pick the true belief. Now, there are a bunch of subsidiary points that we can make in favor of this claim. I'll run through just a few of them here to show you why truth is better than the opposite. The first is that disagreement between people, between groups, between political parties, between religions, etc., presupposes the notion of truth. So imagine that you and a friend are disagreeing over what time the movie starts. You're going to a movie, and your friend says one thing, you say another thing, so you're disagreeing. So what is it that's actually going on here? Well, you are asserting that some particular thing is true, while your friend is asserting that some other thing is true, and that what you're asserting is false. In fact, there'd be nothing to disagree over if truth didn't matter, if truth weren't implicated when we talk to each other, and if truth weren't presupposed in disagreement. That means that it's impossible to disagree with one another without implicating and presupposing the notion of truth. So if two people are disagreeing, they already have a commitment to truth, even if that commitment is implicit. They couldn't recognize that. If there were no truth, how could you possibly disagree? What would you be disagreeing over? Second point about truth here. The possibility of correct or incorrect beliefs presupposes truth in the same way as disagreement presupposes truth. Out there in the world, we judge the beliefs of ourselves and of others as correct or incorrect, as good or bad, as better or worse. But if beliefs can be correct or incorrect, good or bad, better or worse, then there's some standard that they're either meeting or failing to meet. What is that standard? You guessed it, it's the standard of truth. Correct beliefs are the ones that are true, or at least the ones that are most justified, and we'll look at justification and evidence in just a second here. And incorrect beliefs are the false ones, or at least the ones that are unjustified. So when we say that someone's belief is wrong, that someone has an incorrect belief, that someone should change their belief, what we're saying is that their belief doesn't meet the standard of truth. Now, how about evidence? Third subsidiary point about truth. Well, evidence also presupposes truth. Imagine that you have some evidence that it's raining outside. For example, you can hear the sounds of rain on your roof, or you recall that the weather forecast called for rain, or you can smell what smells like wet ground after rain outside. So you have all of this evidence. Now your evidence, even if the evidence isn't decisive, or even if the evidence is misleading, nonetheless points to the truth of the proposition for which it is evidence. So if I hear what sounds like rain on my roof, and I take that as evidence for the truth of the proposition, it's raining, notice how evidence and truth are tied to each other here. What that means is that it's not possible to have evidence for something without implicating truth in the process. So pretty much everything that humans do involves evidence of some sort. The reason that you haven't been hit by cars when crossing the street, or the reason that you know how to get out of a room when you want to get out of a room, or the reason that you can manage to feed yourself, you can find your mouth with your spoon, is because you have the ability to employ evidence, to assess evidence, to see where to go from here with respect to evidence. But evidence is always evidence in favor or in service of the truth. Final subsidiary point here about the goodness of truth is that belief presupposes truth. Beliefs are mental states with propositional content. We've already looked at what propositions are. Propositions are the sorts of things that mean things. They have semantic or linguistic content. Beliefs have propositional content, which just means that when you believe something, what's believed is a proposition. To believe something, take the variable p just to stand in for any proposition, is to take that proposition to be true. Thus, for example, if you believe that the cat is on the mat, what that means is that you take it to be true that the cat is on the mat. Now, just like with our other subsidiary points about the goodness of truth, it's not possible to believe something without implicating truth in the process. So why is truth good? Just remember that this is the second truism that we're discussing here. Truth is good because it guides all of these things. It guides our evidence. It guides our belief. It guides correctness of belief. It guides disagreement, helps us resolve disagreement. It's better to believe true things, to have truth at your disposal, than not. On to the third truism about truth. Truth is a worthy goal of inquiry. Well, what does that mean? Well, we all inquire for all sorts of reasons. We go out there in the world and we dig around, we look at things, we try to figure out what's going on. Now, one of the central reasons for inquiry is to figure out the truth. When you dig around, what are you looking for? The way things actually are. When you investigate, what are you trying to figure out? What the truth is. However, just because we do in fact do something, that doesn't entail that what we do is worthy of doing. So yes, it's true that we go out there into the world, we dig around, we try to figure out what the truth is, but that doesn't yet prove that truth is a worthy goal of inquiry. Just because something is the case, that doesn't yet prove that it ought to be the case, that it's good for us to be doing that. In order for something to be worthy of doing, doing that thing must have some sort of value. Worthiness is a term that implicates the concept of value. This brings us to a central philosophical distinction between what's known as descriptivity and normativity. Descriptivity and normativity are properties of propositions. What this means is that some propositions have the property of descriptivity, while others have the property of normativity. The propositions that have the property of descriptivity are called descriptive propositions, and the propositions that have the property of normativity are called normative propositions. Well, what's the distinction? Descriptive propositions are propositions that purport to express how the world actually is. Now, how the world actually is, that can be how the world was, how the world is currently, or how the world will be in the future. So tenses don't matter here. Descriptive propositions can be about the past, present, or future. And even further, it doesn't matter whether a proposition is true or false in order for it to be a descriptive proposition. So descriptivity is about the form of the proposition, what the proposition is attempting to do. Here's an example of a descriptive proposition. The sun is shining. Now, even if the sun isn't shining, that's still a descriptive proposition. So descriptive propositions can be true, they can be false. All that matters for descriptivity is that the proposition is purporting to say how things actually were. Normative propositions, on the other hand, purport to express how the world ought to be. Now, just as with descriptive propositions, this can be about the past, present, or future, so I can say, it oughtn't have been the case that we ever denied women the right to vote in the United States. I can talk about the present. I can say it oughtn't be the case that people are currently dying from preventable illnesses. And I can talk about the future. I can say it oughtn't be the case that in 100 years we're still suffering from some problem that we're currently suffering from. And just as with descriptive propositions, normative propositions can be true or false. So if I say it oughtn't be the case that we treat people badly for no good reason, that's a true normative proposition. If I say it ought to be the case that we torture animals for fun, well, that's a false descriptive proposition. Let's go on here with respect to descriptivity and normativity, just tell you just a little bit more about descriptivity and normativity as they attach to truth specifically. To say that truth is a good or that truth is a worthy goal of inquiry, now remember that first thing, that truth is good, is Truism 2, that truth is a worthy goal of inquiry, that's Truism 3. That's to say that truth is normative in some way. Now this can sound a little bit confusing because isn't the goal of truth to describe the world accurately? Yes, it is. But to possess truth is normative in that to believe true things is better than to believe false things. We ought to believe true things if we can. If we fail to believe something true and end up believing something false, we end up doing worse than we could. If we end up believing something true and avoiding something false, then we end up doing well in terms of belief. So to say that truth is normative is to say that truth is better than falsity, objectively, whether you recognize it or not. Sometimes people might say that they prefer falsehood. Well, those people aren't doing the right thing if truth is normative. If truth is good, if truth is a worthy goal of inquiry, if that's what we're supposed to be up to when we're believing true things, then true things are always better than false things, so long as everything else is held equal. So let's move on to a very short argument given by Lynch in favor of this claim that truth is a worthy goal of inquiry, and this attaches Truism 2 about the goodness of truth to Truism 3 about the worthiness of truth as a goal of inquiry. Proposition 1, All things being equal, it's better to have true beliefs than to have false beliefs. Proposition 2, if it's better to have true beliefs than to have false beliefs, then there's some value to truth that's built into the concept of betterness. Thus, there is some value to truth. This just follows from our first two premises. Now, if there is some value to truth, then truth is a worthy goal of inquiry. Therefore, truth is, in fact, a worthy goal of inquiry. And Lynch's final truism about truth, the fourth one, is that truth is worth caring about for its own sake. What does this mean? Well, even though truth can get us all sorts of things, truth still matters apart from what it can get us. So truth is valuable because of what it can get us, but truth matters on its own, in and of itself, and for that reason, it's worth caring about truth for its own sake. Now there's a distinction going on here in the background between what philosophers call intrinsic and instrumental value. Sometimes intrinsic value is called essential value, sometimes instrumental value is called extrinsic value. So what do these terms mean? Well, X, for any X, is intrinsically valuable when it's valuable for its own sake. That is, X has value not in terms of getting you something else, but in and of itself. And X is instrumentally valuable when X is valuable because of its ability to bring about some further valuable thing. That is, X is instrumentally valuable when it has its value as a means to some other end. So, very quick examples here. You might think, and this is an example that Lynch gives, that love is intrinsically valuable. Sure, love can get you all sorts of stuff, but love is valuable in and of itself. Money, for example, is instrumentally valuable. Money can get you all sorts of stuff, and most people, unless they are collectors of interesting coins or something like that, most people don't care about money apart from what it can get them. So the reason to get money is because of the stuff that money can get you. That means that money isn't intrinsically valuable, it's instrumentally valuable. Now, this distinction isn't mutually exclusive. Things can be both instrumentally and intrinsically valuable. As Lynch notes with his love case, love can get you, for example, companionship. Love can get you, for example, sex. But love is also valuable in and of itself, so it's both instrumentally and intrinsically valuable. Now, to say that truth is worth caring about for its own sake is to say that truth is intrinsically valuable, whether its instrumental value might also exist. Well, why think that truth is intrinsically valuable? Lynch gives us the example of the experience machine. The experience machine is a thought experiment that was created by philosopher Robert Nozick in his 1974 book, Anarchy, State, and Utopia, which was a political treatise that argued for the truth of something like political libertarianism. This experience machine thought experiment has long outlived the supporters of Anarchy, State, and Utopia and has been used for many other purposes than the purposes that Nozick put it to in his own work. Here is the recreation of the experience machine thought experiment by Lynch. Suppose I had a machine that allowed you to experience whatever you want. Once inside, floating in the tank, you live in a virtual reality of your own design, one filled with experiences of adoring friends, marvelous adventures, spectacular food, good sex, and great conversations. None of it would be real, of course, but it would seem to be. It could even be arranged so that once inside the machine, you completely forget, that you're in a machine. There's only one catch. Once inside, you can never come out. So what would you do? Now, most philosophers have thought that most people wouldn't go into the experience machine. Now, I think that maybe philosophers are more committed to reality than non-philosophers are, because a number of people might say, well, look, what if your life is terrible? If your life is horrible, then wouldn't a false good reality be better than a true terrible reality? Now, if your life is pretty good already and you could just have a slightly better life in the experience machine, it doesn't seem like there's any good reason to get inside it. So that's some evidence in favor of the claim that truth is intrinsically good, but it still seems as though it's plausible that some people might jettison truth, might give up truth in order to have a false good experience of their life. So let's modify that thought experiment, the experience machine thought experiment, so that we can take into account this objection. So here's the modification. Suppose you got two options. In the first option, you can get into the experience machine the way it's already been described to you, and you can have any experience you want, and you can forget that you're in the experience machine, but also you can never get out of it once you're in. So same as the original hypothesis. Now, second option. You can have whatever experience you would have had in the experience machine. So whatever experience would have happened to you in the experience machine will be made actual in the real world. You can live those experiences in real life, not as an illusion, but your actual life will be modified. Now, is there any reason to get into the experience machine? Well, now it seems like no. Why would you get into the experience machine? It seems, in fact, better to stay out. So if you're having a terrible life, you have two options. Have a better false life in the experience machine, or have that exact same better life in the actual world. Or even if you're having a pretty good life and you could have a better life in the experience machine, would you pick the experience machine or having the exact same better life in the actual world? Now it seems like there would be nobody who would say that you should opt for the experience machine over actual life once the quality of the experiences in both is the same. What this proves, we can think, is that what matters is reality to us. Now, it's not the only thing that matters, certainly, but given a choice between two situations, one that's not real and one that is, if everything else is equal, then we would choose the life that's real. And this shows us that truth is worth caring about for its own sake. Now, this sort of choice shows up in movies, television shows, novels all the time. One of the most famous examples of this choice is from the 1999 movie The Matrix, and I'll play you that short scene right now. And don't worry, if you haven't seen The Matrix, there's no spoiler here, but if you haven't seen The Matrix, it's time. Maybe after this lecture, go watch it.
Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. Do you know what I'm talking about?
The Matrix.
Do you want to know what it is? The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
What truth?
That you are a slave, Neo. like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more. Follow me.
Thus, we have Lynch's 4 truisms about truth. Truth is objective, meaning that truth is about reality as it actually is, independent of what we might think about it. Even if sometimes we can't get to the truth still is, still exists. Truth is good, meaning all other things being equal, it's better to believe true things than to believe false things. Truth is a worthy goal of inquiry, meaning that when we inquire, when we go out into the world, when we investigate, when we uncover, when we try to understand, doing this in the service of truth is valuable. And fourth and finally, truth is worth caring about for its own sake, meaning that truth, whatever its instrumental value, is also intrinsically valuable. Whatever truth can get us, it's worth caring about truth because truth is truth, valuable in and of itself. Thus, Michael Lynch has shown us that truth has a number of very important properties. Properties that make truth interesting, the sort of thing that philosophers should investigate, but also the sort of thing that non-philosophers should care about. Truth is a very specific concept, a very particular term, and to use the word true or truth in ways that don't point to the concept of truth as investigated here is to misuse the concept to mislead others and ourselves. So, since truth is worth caring about, then we ought to care about how we care about truth. And since truth is so fundamental with respect to things like belief and evidence and disagreement, the things that are the foundations of our lives as individual and social creatures, we need to make sure that we're very clear on what truth is and very clear about what truth isn't. Thank you.